Welcome back on the record. Let's talk about vaccines. We have seen the CDC panel recommend new rules for the COVID shot and combine measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella vaccine. So, as a doctor, what is your reaction to the changes?
I think it's very important that patients dialogue with their physicians to talk about the correct vaccine schedule and the number of doses that should be done. I think that individual physicians are best poised now to deal with individual patients to give the advice that's needed for patients. Now let's deal with facts. Vaccines have prevented millions and millions of deaths. Vaccines that are approved in our nation are safe and effective. One may ask, should I have 4 or 5 vaccines at the same time? A legitimate question. Your doctor can talk with you about that. I had my COVID and flu shots within the last 10 days because I believe they're effective to preventing disease. And frankly, with the responsibilities I have, if I can prevent illness, I want to. I think that the leaders of Massachusetts have made vaccines available to the people of the Commonwealth, and I think we should go forward with them. Vaccines should not be political. Disease is not partisan. And so what we should do is encourage everyone to dialogue with their doctors, get the vaccines that we know will prevent disease, particularly for children. We should not be making decisions about disease, about vaccine administration that's going to affect the health of our children. The fact that we have a measles problem in our country
in 2025,
2025,
right.
It's literally outrageous.
Right.
Wow. Well, you know, after nearly 2 decades now, 17 years, it's your final year at UMass Chan Medical School. How do you feel about the state of UMass Chan as you leave, and what are you hoping for that happens after you're gone?
Well, I'm not gone. I'm going back to the faculty once I'm finished with my chancellor duties. One of the greatest privileges in my lifetime has been able to assemble the outstanding people who are UMass Chan. Sometimes I think there's a little too much focus on the chancellor. I think there should be focus on the people who have committed their lives to research, to nursing, to teaching the next generation of physicians. And I think if you look at the institution, 2 Nobel Prizes. In fact, as of this week, we are still the institution. One of our faculty members has this year's Nobel Prize in medicine.
Right. Yeah.
We should all be very proud of that in the
Right.
Commonwealth.
Yes.
And the fact that we have assembled this incredible group of people, and you know, when we recruit faculty, we see the top people in the world, and we're able to bring them here. And now we need to nurture them. So one of the things I've been doing when we worked with the Morningside Foundation to get the naming gift that made us UMass Chan, when we talked to the Damari family about making a commitment to neurodegenerative diseases, we talked about the people that we have, and I like to use the phrase, at UMass Chan, we are all about trying to change the course of history of disease. And I would tell the people who watch your show, I would tell the leaders of our government, I would encourage the leaders of the university to recognize that the crown jewel of the university system resides at UMass Chan. And they should be extremely proud of the people that we've brought together. And now, as we move into the future, we should be able to take a greater advantage of what has been built.
Dr. Collins, great to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Always nice
sitting
to
in the
be
chair
with
and
you.
enlightening us through and guiding us through this very complicated and complex issue. Our political roundtable is up next. Stay with us.